Paul Price in the comments says, it hurts me to say this as a Celtic fan, but you have to give credit to the Rangers board for backing their manager, getting their signings bedded in early. Well, our board, who obviously learned nothing from the John McGinn fiasco, they continue to dilly-dally, forget about Rodgers extending his contract. It won't happen, and you couldn't blame him with this board. We talked about that last night as well, Keith, didn't we? That this summer could potentially shape Brendan Rodgers' future.
I think it's difficult, Daniel, for Celtic, and Keith's touched on it there, but see, just striking that balance, because there's obviously money in the bank, so there's cash there to spend. Brendan Rodgers wants to get the best players possible, and the fans demand the big fees. When it was 11 million for Engels and 9 million for Ida, 6 for Trusty, it felt as if they were going up a level, and you could argue it worked for them. They get a double, and maybe even more importantly, they progress further in the Champions League. But where do you go for there? The way the Champions League is, how far can you actually go? I mean, what do you need to spend to go a couple of stages further, or even just one stage further? So it's such a difficult balancing act, because I say there'll be a desire there to go and spend serious money and get the best players in. But at the same time, they've been so successful with this model of buying players relatively cheap, still winning things, still seeing off Rangers domestically, and then even better, selling these guys for a profit. Kuhn is obviously the prime example now, assuming that deal goes through. And even with the challenge from Rangers, I mean, and I agree with Keith at the start saying, it's a bit an arms race now, and they are aware that it looks like there's going to be a bigger challenge from across the city, but they don't. They were 17 points, a gap at the end of last season. I mean, there'll be people within Celtic probably think, one or two tweaks this summer, and we should still be ahead of Rangers no matter what they do. So I just think it's a really difficult balancing it, and that's where I think Jacko's right, that there seems to be this kind of hybrid now where, okay, there can be a couple of club projects like Inamura, who Brendan Rodgers is willing to work with if they're good enough. But at the same time, he's still the manager, and he's still got to think about a Rangers challenge. Might be his last season at Celtic. I've said this before. He wanted to get on the ultimate high, winning everything, more progress in Europe. So it's a difficult balancing act, and that's why it's going to be so interesting and intriguing as the window goes on, or certainly getting towards the end of the window, to see how they look at the end up.
But if there is a compromise there, Scotty, and it's an agreed compromise, and Brendan Rodgers is happy to cede to the club that, yep, if you've got some targets that you want to go and invest in because you think they're projects that will turn a profit, go and do it. But just so long as Brendan Rodgers feels that he's still getting the amount of backing financially that he feels he needs in order to improve his first 11. That is the driving force for Brendan Rodgers. It's not who's going to be good in 3 years' time. It's who's going to be good now, who's going to make the team better next season, the starting 11, who's going to come in and take the place of one of the guys that was a starter last season. That's where Brendan Rodgers is shopping. That's where his concentration and focus goes. And I completely understand that. And what I would say further than that is, if he feels that he's got that backing and he's getting that support and it gets him to where he wants to go, Scott, in terms of a domestic treble, more progress in Europe, and just a real strong season, perhaps even breaking through that 100-point barrier, which we talked about this time last year, would be a target for him. He came up 8 points short, but I think he drew 5 and lost 4 league games. Now, in Brendan Rodgers' mind, that being a perfectionist, that's not good enough. So where can he find the next level player that takes him just that little bit better, that helps turn those 5 draws and 4 defeats into a couple of draws and 1 defeat, and allows him to put down a real strong season, perhaps a mirror image of his first ever season in Scottish football, when they went undefeated and won the lot. And I think he'll probably want to go even one better than that by then achieving something in Europe. That's what Brendan Rodgers is requiring. And I think if he feels he's been properly backed and the finances are made available for him to buy a couple of players that do that and make them stronger as a starting 11, and he goes on to have that sort of success this season, that's potentially a game changer in terms of, does he want to go again when his 3-year deal's up?
See on that, Jack, and I don't know if you boys have discussed this in the last couple of nights, but
You've not been watching?
Are you surprised? And again, a lot of stuff I've been covering obviously has been Rangers, but are you surprised, or do you think Celtic will be disappointed with missing out on Kvistgaarden? Because that seemed like the fee being reported at Norwich seems to be like
6.9.
6.9. That to me would almost be, in terms of profile, price tag, sell-on potential, that would have seemed no doable for. And it seems like they've been linked to him for so long. I mean, there must have been a real interest there. I mean, his name was constantly mentioned. Do you think they'll be a bit disappointed that they didn't get that deal done?
I was saying that, Keith. Remember, we talked about it the other night, and I think you made a good point, to be fair, that they let it go so easily, Celtic, or seemingly so easily, that maybe they've got another iron in the fire. Maybe there's something else.
That's my belief on this. And I might be proven wrong, but I strongly suspect, and I know that this boy has been a person of interest in and around Celtic Park for not just one transfer window. We're talking about, I'm going to say, as many as 7 or 8 of the past transfer windows. He has been on a list. He's been on a list of targets, and it was actually explained to me some time ago that had Celtic acted when he was first originally identified, I think it was by Mark Lowell. So that shows we're going back a bit. And had Celtic moved at that point, I think they would have got him for I mean, you're talking, relative buttons. And I believe that Celtic, this is what surprised me about the price. I think Celtic thought that you'd need to go to 10 million or above to get him in at this point. And yet it turns out there's some sort of contractual clause which allowed him to go to Norwich for 6.9. That really does surprise me. And there's no way Celtic haven't done their homework on it. Mm-hmm. So it tells me that I believe that Brendan Rodgers thinks he has identified something better than that, and probably something a little bit more expensive.
Paul Brady points out that the better players move later in the window as they have more options to weigh up where they can go. And as you say, Keith, it's only what is it? The
so early.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people saying, Mark saying, obviously they've still not signed a replacement for Kyogo. John saying that as well, and a couple of people asking Mikey here, saying any word on Yamada, the Kawasaki striker, and I mean, so many strikers as well, Keith, have been linked with Celtic. We talked about Ambrosino yesterday, but there's more.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're saying there might be two separate kind of strategies at play, I think that the Japanese striker that we're talking about there would come into the club investment branch, and I don't believe for a single second that he's a guy that Brendan Rodgers has picked out and said, yep, go for him for 1.5 million. That'll do me as Kyogo's replacement. I just don't believe it.